In the dim glow of a silent museum, Avery Winters moved with practiced grace, slipping past security cameras and motion sensors as if she were invisible. She wore all black, her face obscured beneath a cap and mask. This heist wasn't just about stealing art, it was about revenge. 5 years ago, Avery's world had shattered. Her father, a brilliant artist, was humiliated and driven to despair by Julian, a wealthy gallery owner who'd ruthlessly claimed her father's masterpiece as his own, passing it off as an anonymous acquisition. Avery had been powerless back then, a student with nothing to her name, watching helplessly as her father fell into depression. When he died, she knew she had to make things right. For years, Avery trained herself in the art of theft, learning every trick to break into the most secure locations. Tonight, she was here to take back her father's painting, the one that had been hidden away in Julian Grant's private collection. But more than that, she planned to ruin Julian by exposing his darkest secrets. The museum was the first step in her plan. Julian had loaned several rare pieces here to establish his reputation further. Avery intended to take the rarest of them, a prized painting valued in the millions. It would hit Julian hard, financially, yes, but also his reputation. She would leave clues that pointed directly to him, tainting his name. Avery crept toward the room where the painting was displayed. She quickly scanned the setup, laser alarms across the entrance, a rotating camera above, and pressure-sensitive floors around the display. But she'd prepared for this. She carefully removed a slim device from her bag, designed to jam the laser sensors for a few seconds. Timing was everything. She counted down silently. 3, 2, 1. The device clicked, silencing the alarm. She moved fast, reaching the painting and gently lifting it from its frame. Her heartbeat quickened as she held it in her hands. This was only the beginning, but it was a powerful start, a message to Julian that his wealth and influence couldn't shield him from the truth. She slid the painting into her bag and exited the museum as quietly as she'd entered. The plan was far from over. Her next move was crucial. By morning, she needed to have the painting stored in a secure location, ready to release a photograph of it online with a note revealing Julian's forgery and deception, a fitting taste of his own medicine. Outside, she breathed deeply, feeling the weight of the night settle over her. For once, she felt a spark of justice within her grasp, and nothing was going to stop her, not even Julian himself. But as she rounded a corner, she sensed a shadow trailing her, someone watching. Her instincts flared. Had someone already uncovered her plans? Avery quickened her pace, the thrill of the heist blending with a new, lurking danger. Revenge was only sweet if she could finish what she started. The streets were quiet as Avery made her way back to her rented apartment, every nerve on edge. The heist had gone as planned, yet that shadow trailing her at the museum's exit still haunted her thoughts. Her instincts told her to trust no one, not even her reflection. Years of preparation had brought her here, and she couldn't afford a single misstep now. She took a roundabout route back, slipping into alleyways and checking over her shoulder. But she saw no one, only empty streets and dark windows. Finally, satisfied that she was alone, she entered her apartment and locked the door behind her. She placed her father's painting gently on the small table, gazing at it with a sense of triumph and sadness. The colors, the brushstrokes, her father's unmistakable touch lived in every inch of the canvas. This was more than a heist to Avery. It was her father's legacy, her final act of loyalty to him. But she knew this one painting wasn't enough to bring Julian down. The man had built a fortress of lies around himself, hiding behind his wealth, power, and connections. To truly destroy him, she needed to go deeper, exposing all his dirty dealings. Just as Avery began to relax, her phone buzzed. She frowned, picking it up. No one knew this number. She hadn't given it to anyone. It was a burner phone she'd bought solely for emergencies. Her pulse quickened as she read the message. "Nice job tonight, Avery, but you can't outsmart me." A chill ran down her spine. No name, no contact number. Whoever this was, they knew exactly what she'd done, and they were watching her. She forced herself to breathe deeply, gripping the phone tightly as she thought through her options. Who could possibly know her true identity? She'd been so careful, taking every precaution. For a moment, she considered abandoning her entire plan, disappearing into the night and leaving this life behind. But she pushed the thought away. This was bigger than her, and there was no turning back now. Whoever sent the message clearly had some leverage, but she wasn't going to let them rattle her. She typed a response. "Who is this?" After a few agonizing moments, another reply came through. "Someone who wants Julian to suffer just as much as you do. We could be allies. Or enemies. Depends on you." Avery felt a flicker of curiosity. Could this person be serious? She'd planned to do this alone, yet the thought of an ally was tempting. Someone with the same desire for revenge, someone who might have access to information she lacked. Her thoughts raced. Trusting a stranger was dangerous, but if they truly wanted to see Julian fall, they could be an asset. She typed back quickly, her fingers hovering over the keys. "Meet me tomorrow. Midnight, Central Park." She pressed send, heart pounding. Whatever awaited her tomorrow, it would bring her one step closer to the justice her father deserved. For now, though, Avery stayed vigilant, knowing that her mission was becoming riskier with every passing moment. The next night, Avery arrived at Central Park just before midnight, her senses sharp and alert. She had no idea who to expect, but carried her usual defenses, a small blade concealed in her boot and a mental map of the park's exits in case she needed to escape quickly. The moon was low, casting faint light through the leaves, and a chill hung in the air. As she waited, her thoughts kept returning to her father. She could almost hear his voice, urging her to be cautious, to trust no one. But if this mysterious contact really had insider knowledge, they could be the missing piece she needed to bring Julian down. It was a gamble, but she had no choice. If she wanted to take down her father's killer, she needed every advantage she could find. Footsteps crunched on the path behind her. Avery didn't turn immediately, staying poised and calm. When she finally looked back, she saw a tall figure approaching, cloaked in shadow. The figure stopped a few feet away. "Avery," he said, his voice deep and composed. He stepped into the moonlight, revealing a familiar face. Her breath caught. "Lucian," she whispered, incredulous. Lucian had been Julian's right-hand man, the one Avery had seen by her father's side countless times before things went south. She'd assumed he was just another one of Julian's pawns, but here he was, meeting her in the dead of night with knowledge of her plan. "I know this is a surprise," he said, his tone steady, "but I've been watching Julian for years. What he did to your father, and to so many others, he betrayed us all." Avery narrowed her eyes. "And you expect me to believe you're on my side now, after years of loyalty to him?" Lucian looked away, guilt clouding his features. "I was loyal, yes, but only until I saw what he was capable of. Julian only cares about himself. He destroyed your family, and he nearly destroyed mine too. I left when I realized I was disposable to him." Avery crossed her arms, skeptical. "And why didn't you do something about it sooner?" Lucian took a slow breath. "Because I needed to know he'd pay for his crimes. I wanted to make sure his downfall was complete, and I've been gathering evidence ever since. But on my own, I'm limited. Together, we could finally make him pay." Avery's mind raced. She couldn't trust Lucian completely, but his anger and regret seemed genuine. And if he had real information on Julian's operations, they'd have a fighting chance. But she needed to test his loyalty. "Fine," she said slowly. "Prove it. What do you have on him?" Lucian pulled a flash drive from his pocket, holding it out to her. "This is just the beginning. Locations of his safe houses, the people he's bribed. It's all here. But there's more I need to show you. I can't do this without you, Avery." After a tense pause, she took the drive, feeling the weight of their unspoken agreement. "If you betray me, Lucian, you won't live to regret it." Lucian met her gaze, unfazed. "Fair enough. Let's bring him down together." The next day, Avery sat alone in her small, dim apartment, staring at her laptop as the contents of Lucian's flash drive unfolded on the screen. The drive was a goldmine of information, names, dates, locations, enough to begin mapping out the network that Julian had spent years building. With each new file she opened, the scope of Julian's operation grew clearer, and Avery felt her resolve harden. The documents revealed a chilling truth. Julian's influence extended far beyond her father's former business. His organization infiltrated legitimate industries, political circles, and even law enforcement. She was looking at a web of corruption, and Julian was at its center, pulling every thread. One document stood out. It detailed a recent shipment, a large one scheduled to arrive in a few days. The location was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, far enough from prying eyes but close enough for easy access. This, Avery realized, could be her chance to strike. As she was absorbing the details, her phone buzzed. Lucian's name flashed on the screen. "I assume you're looking at the warehouse documents?" he asked, his voice steady. "Yes," she replied. "It's more than I expected. He's built something monstrous." "That's why it needs to be stopped," Lucian said. "This shipment, it's critical. If we intercept it, it will send a message to his allies, shake their confidence in him." Avery hesitated. She knew the risks. Julian wasn't the kind of man to forgive such a direct attack on his operation, but this was their opportunity to hit him where it hurt, and to warn his associates that he was vulnerable. "All right," she said, her voice firm, "we'll intercept it. But I want you there. If this is a setup—" "It's not," Lucian cut her off. "We're in this together now, Avery. I'll be there with you." They planned quickly, dividing responsibilities and deciding on their entry and exit points. Lucian would provide cover from a distance, keeping watch for any of Julian's men, while Avery would handle securing the shipment itself. She was used to relying only on herself, but for this, she had to trust Lucian's loyalty. The night of the interception arrived faster than she anticipated. Avery slipped through the shadows toward the warehouse, her senses heightened. Lucian was already in position, and her earpiece crackled as his voice came through. "Remember, stay out of sight until we're sure it's safe," he instructed. Avery scanned the area, watching for any movement. The warehouse loomed ahead, silent and dark. From the outside, it seemed abandoned, but Avery knew better. Julian would never leave something valuable unguarded. Creeping closer, she caught sight of a guard pacing near the entrance. Timing her steps with the rhythm of his, she approached, silently taking him down and pulling him into the shadows. Her pulse quickened as she slipped inside the building. Rows of crates were stacked along the walls, and the air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and dust. Avery moved cautiously, her eyes scanning the labels on the crates until she found what she was looking for. As she reached for the shipment, Lucian's voice crackled in her ear. "You've got company," he warned. Avery tensed, her hand hovering over the crate. "How many?" "2. No, 3, Lucian said, his tone urgent. "They're heading your way." Taking a steadying breath, Avery ducked behind the crates, preparing herself for the confrontation. Avery steadied her breath, crouching behind the crates as the footsteps drew closer. She tightened her grip on the small knife in her hand, her pulse quickening with each passing second. Lucian's voice came through the earpiece, his tone calm but insistent. "They're about 10 feet from you. Stay low and wait until they pass." She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. Trusting him felt strange, but so far he had proven reliable. She couldn't afford to let doubt cloud her focus now. The 3 men approached, speaking quietly among themselves, oblivious to her presence. As they walked past, Avery saw her opportunity. Moving with silent precision, she slipped out from behind the crates and darted toward the next row, inching closer to the targeted shipment. She was almost there, just a few more steps. Then suddenly, one of the men stopped. "Wait, did you hear that?" he muttered, turning his head in her direction. His hand reached for the gun at his hip, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the area. Avery froze, pressing herself against the crates. She held her breath, praying he would dismiss it as nothing and move on. But the man seemed to sense something was off. He signaled to the others, and they began fanning out, searching the shadows with growing suspicion. "Lucian," Avery whispered urgently, "I need a distraction. Now." There was a brief silence on the other end before Lucian replied, "On it. Brace yourself." A moment later, a faint clanging noise echoed from the opposite side of the warehouse. The men's heads snapped in the direction of the sound, their attention drawn away from Avery's hiding spot. Taking advantage of the distraction, she slipped around the crates, moving swiftly toward the shipment she'd come for. The crate was marked with a series of numbers, just as the documents had described. Inside, she found rows of small packages, likely filled with drugs and weapons, valuable enough to make Julian furious if they went missing. She began loading them into the bag she'd brought, working as quickly as she could. Just as she secured the last package, Lucian's voice crackled through again. Avery, they're circling back. You need to move, now. She didn't need to be told twice. Slinging the bag over her shoulder, Avery darted toward the exit, her steps light but rapid. As she neared the door, she heard a shout behind her. "Hey, someone's here!" One of the guards yelled, and the sound of footsteps echoed as they gave chase. Avery sprinted through the dimly lit warehouse, weaving between crates and dodging obstacles. She reached the door just as it burst open, and she slipped into the night, feeling the rush of cold air against her face. Her heart hammered, but she couldn't afford to stop. She could hear them behind her, their footsteps pounding closer. Lucian's voice guided her through the darkness. "Head left. There's a fence about 50 yards ahead. I'll cover you." Following his instructions, Avery veered left, her legs burning with effort. She spotted the fence and leapt over it, just as a gunshot rang out behind her. She stumbled on the landing but quickly regained her balance, disappearing into the shadows beyond the warehouse grounds. When she finally reached safety, she leaned against a wall, catching her breath. Lucian's voice came through, steady and calm. "Good work, Avery. You got what we needed." She allowed herself a small smile. This was only the beginning, and Julian wouldn't know what hit him. Avery knew it was only a matter of time before Julian found out what she'd done. She could almost picture his reaction, the fury in his eyes, the clenched jaw. But she hadn't expected the response to be so swift. The very next morning, rumors were already spreading throughout Julian's territory. Inside the safe house, as Lucian paced back and forth, listening intently to updates through his own channels. His contacts had confirmed what they both feared. Julian was in a rage, and he was taking it out on everyone around him. Whispers about a mole within his organization had already reached the streets, and Julian's men were on high alert, interrogating anyone they deemed suspicious. Lucian glanced at Avery, his expression dark. He knows someone close betrayed him, but he hasn't figured out it's you yet. He's tightening his grip on his men. We need to be more careful than ever. Avery nodded, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and apprehension. She'd hurt Julian's operation in a way that was sure to leave a mark. But she also knew the consequences would be severe if he ever discovered it was her. "How much damage did we actually do?" she asked, curious about the reach of her actions. Lucian allowed himself a faint smirk. "Enough to disrupt his distribution for weeks. Those were critical shipments. Without them, his influence over the area weakens." Avery felt a thrill of victory, but quickly tempered it. The more she weakened Julian, the closer she got to her end goal, but also the more dangerous things became. Later that night, they received another update. Julian had decided to take drastic measures. He was planning to host a gathering with all his top associates, likely to make an example out of someone or to issue a stern warning. Avery knew this was her chance to learn more, to find something crucial that could finally tip the scales in her favor. "We need someone on the inside," Avery said, her voice firm. "I need to be there." Lucian looked at her, his gaze skeptical but assessing. "It's risky, Avery. If anyone even suspects you, you're as good as dead." She nodded. "I know, but it's worth it." Julian wouldn't risk gathering all his trusted people together unless he had something big to discuss. "If I can get close enough, I might learn exactly how to dismantle his network." After a long pause, Lucian finally relented. "Fine, but you won't go in alone. I'll have someone watching from the outside, ready to intervene if things go sideways." Avery prepared herself, her mind racing with the possibilities. She felt the familiar thrill of the challenge, but now there was a bitter edge to it. Each step brought her closer to justice, yet the risks kept growing. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. As she got ready, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, her face hardened with resolve. This was the night she'd find the weakness in Julian's empire, or die trying. Either way, she was ready for whatever came next. The gathering Avery walked into the grand ballroom, masked in her disguise, blending seamlessly with Julian's associates. The room was a display of opulence and authority, with Julian standing at the center, exuding a magnetic yet dangerous presence. Men and women from all corners of his empire gathered around, whispering nervously. Avery's heart raced as she moved through the crowd, each step carefully measured. She could feel the weight of their fear and loyalty, and she knew the stakes of what she was about to do. Lucian had managed to get her close, but she was on her own now. She kept to the edges, her gaze locked on Julian, studying his every move. He was more tense than usual, his gaze sharp as he scanned the room. Rumors of betrayal had clearly shaken him, and tonight he was here to assert control and to find his traitor. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Julian began, his voice cold and commanding. "Recent events have led me to believe there's a rat among us, someone who thought they could undermine me." His eyes narrowed as he looked around, his stare daring anyone to meet his gaze. Avery kept her head down, heart pounding, trying to calm her breathing. She couldn't risk revealing herself, but she knew she had to hear every word. Julian continued, his voice laced with contempt. "This betrayal will not go unpunished," he said, "and tonight I plan to make an example of those who would dare question my authority." Beside him, a man stepped forward, dragging a trembling figure from the crowd. Avery's stomach twisted as she recognized the man, one of Julian's former loyalists, now barely recognizable, beaten and bruised. Julian approached him, sneering down with satisfaction. "This," Julian declared, his voice echoing across the room, "is what happens to those who think they can cross me. There is no forgiveness in this life, only consequences." The room was silent, tension hanging thickly in the air. Avery felt a chill crawl up her spine as Julian raised his hand, signaling his men to take action. A gunshot rang out, and the man slumped to the floor. Avery clenched her fists, suppressing the urge to react. This was Julian's world, one built on fear and blood, and it disgusted her. She felt Lucian's presence nearby, a silent reassurance. He hadn't dared enter, but was stationed just outside, ready if she needed an escape. But Avery wasn't done yet. As Julian turned back to the crowd, basking in his control, Avery slipped closer to him, positioning herself near the edge of the stage. Suddenly, she caught a snippet of conversation from two men standing nearby, whispering about Julian's hidden stash, the true core of his operation. Her pulse quickened as she listened, piecing together their words. They mentioned a location on the outskirts of the city, a secluded warehouse that Julian used as his private fortress. As Julian finished his speech, dismissing the crowd with a reminder of loyalty and obedience, Avery backed away, the crucial information now safely locked in her mind. She knew where to hit him now. That night, as she slipped out of the mansion, Lucian joined her. They exchanged a brief, knowing glance. "I have it," Avery whispered, a faint smile breaking through her grim expression. "I know where we can end this." Lucian nodded, his face set with determination. "Then let's finish what we started." Avery's heart surged with a renewed sense of purpose. Julian had no idea his end was near. Avery and Lucian are ready for their final confrontation with Julian. After weeks of preparation, they're fully committed to ending his reign and avenging her father's death. The night is cold and silent as they drive toward Julian's warehouse, where she knows he'll be meeting his inner circle. As they approach the building, Avery feels a mix of fear and determination. Her heart races, but Lucian's steady presence calms her. He hands her a small handgun, his gaze firm. "Stay sharp," he says, his voice low. She nods, gripping the gun tightly. Every step she takes feels like it's been leading her to this moment. They make their way inside the warehouse, using shadows as their cover. The place is dimly lit, filled with the faint smell of gasoline and metal. They spot Julian standing with his men, completely unaware of what's coming. Avery can feel the adrenaline surging through her as she watches him, remembering every pain he caused her family, every life he destroyed without remorse. They inch closer until they're within earshot. Avery takes a deep breath, whispering to Lucian, "It's time." They step out of the shadows, guns drawn, and the sound of gunfire quickly fills the room as they take down Julian's guards with swift precision. Julian's face twists in shock and rage as he realizes who's behind the ambush. "Avery," he sneers, his voice dripping with disdain. She steps closer, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that unnerves him. "This is for my father and for every family you tore apart." Julian chuckles darkly, trying to maintain his composure. "You think you can stop me? I'll always have men, power, more than you'll ever understand." "You're wrong," Lucian interjects, his gun aimed at Julian. "Your empire ends here." With a quick, decisive movement, Avery pulls the trigger, the sound echoing through the empty warehouse. Julian stumbles back, shock in his eyes as he realizes this is the end. He falls to the ground, his reign of terror brought to an abrupt, final halt. The silence that follows is heavy, almost surreal. Avery stands over Julian's lifeless body, feeling a strange mix of relief and sorrow. She's accomplished what she set out to do, but the weight of it all presses down on her. Lucian places a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's over," he says quietly. Avery nods, a tear slipping down her cheek. "It's finally over." They leave the warehouse together, stepping out into the night as the first rays of dawn break on the horizon. Avery feels a sense of closure, knowing that her father's death has been avenged and Julian's darkness has been snuffed out. Avery realizes that while the road ahead may be uncertain, she has reclaimed her life. The darkness may always be a part of her, but she's ready to face whatever the future holds.